สิทธิ์เขาเริ่มบ่สิทธิ์
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Ade, we will start now. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, please sit.
โอเคสบายดีตอนเช้าทุกท่านยินดีต้อนรับบรรดาท่านเข้าสู่สุดสัมมนาในหัวข้อเกี่ยวกับการจัดตั้งปฏิบัติและการประเมินผลมาตรการด้านโภชนาการในโรงเรียนมื้อนี้นำเสนอโดยดร. อาเดผู้จัดการหน่วยงานพัฒนาชุมชนและหัวหน้าหน่วยงานครูร่วมพัฒนาที่ประเทศอินโดนีเซียให้เกียรติเข้ามานำเสนอในมื้อนี้เนาะขอเรียนแขกที่มีเกียรติท่านหญิงท่านชายทุกท่านทั้งออนไลน์และออฟไลน์ที่รักแพงที่สละเวลาเข้าร่วมของประชุมสัมมนาในมื้อนี้ข้าพเจ้ามีความรู้สึกเป็นเกียรติอย่างสูงที่ได้ถูกมอบหมายจากหัวหน้าศูนย์โภชนาการในการนำพาสู่สัมมนาในมื้อนี้สุดสัมมนาในมื้อนี้จะเกิดขึ้นได้ก็ย้อนมีการร่วมมือระหว่างศูนย์โภชนาการและองค์การ ANRCB ดังพวกเฮาได้รู้นํากันแล้วว่าเวียกงานโภชนาการแม่นนอนอยู่ในแผนงาน1ใน8แผนงานของกระทรวงสาธารณสุขและยังเป็นบุริมสิทธิ์ของรัฐบาลเพื่อแน่ใส่แก้ไขภาวะขาดสารอาหารในทุกรูปแบบและการเผยแพร่ข้อมูลข่าวสารด้านโภชนาการนี้ก็แม่น1ในกิจกรรมที่จําเป็นต้องได้จัดตั้งปฏิบัติเพื่อเฮ็ดให้บรรดาผู้ร่วมงานบรรดาแพทย์หมอพนักงานและพ่อแม่ผู้ปกครองนี้ให้ได้รู้ว่าข้อมูลด้านโภชนาการนี้มันมีความสําคัญและมีมาตรการในการจัดตั้งปฏิบัติเกี่ยวกับการแก้ไขโภชนาการนี้แม่นต้องได้แน่ใส่สุมใส่บรรดาข้อมูลที่เป็นหลักฐานทางด้านวิทยาศาสตร์เพื่อเฮ็ดให้เฮารู้สภาพณปัจจุบันและบรรดากิจกรรมที่เฮาจะตั้งปฏิบัติโดยเฉพาะกลุ่มเป้าหมายอยู่ในโรงเรียนว่าเฮาได้จัดตั้งปฏิบัติในโรงเรียนนั้นแม่นเฮาเน้นใส่จุดใดแน่ทั้งหมดนี้ก็แม่นแน่ใส่ปรับปรุงเฮ็ดให้กลุ่มเป้าหมายหรือว่าเด็กน้อยนักเรียนอยู่ในโรงเรียนนั้นมีสุขภาพแข็งแรงมีการพัฒนาการไปตามวัยอายุดังนั้นมื้อนี้พวกเฮามีโอกาสดีที่ได้มีวิทยากรที่มีประสบการณ์ในการจัดตั้งปฏิบัติเวียกงานโภชนาการในโรงเรียนจากประเทศอินโดนีเซียที่เพิ่นสละเวลาเข้ามาแล้วก็มาเผยแพร่บรรดาข้อมูลแล้วก็มาตรการในการจัดตั้งปฏิบัติในโรงเรียนประเทศอินโดนีเซียให้แก่ประเทศลาวเฮาฉะนั้นเพื่อบ่เป็นการซักษาเสียเวลาขอเชิญบรรดาท่านรับฟังการสัมมนาจากวิทยากรจากอินโดนีเซียโดยท่านดร. อาเลนับแต่วินาทีนี้เป็นต้นไปแล้วก็ขอเรียนเชิญท่านดร. อาเลดูวิลาดีอันนี้นำเสนอตามจุดประสงค์และหัวข้อเลยขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญเจ้า
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for the introductions. Hi, hello everyone. It's very nice to meeting all of you today. I noticed that there is no time difference between Laos and also Jakarta. So, very good morning from Jakarta. You can just call me Ade because it's my nickname, and usually it is easier to call me that way. Yeah, I would like to say thank you especially to the committee, the the Center of Nutrition and Ministry of Health of Lao PDR, particularly Dr. Ula and also the team for inviting me to this event, and also for the communications through emails and also chat preparing this event. I will be, of course, very happy to open my video along my presentations, but I would like to excuse myself in case I receive notifications about the low internet access, so I will turn my video off. Yep, moment. Okay, so I am informed that the session will be maximally 1.5 hours. So I have with me the presentations. I have 30 slides, so hopefully I can finish everything within less than 45 minutes. And after that, we can start discussion. But I will also open anytime you have concern, questions, or you want to share your own experience. So please do so. You can raise your hands, or I will let the committee to manage how it will work for us. Yeah, but I will be very okay with any arrangement. So I will start my my sharing today is about the implementation and evaluation of nutrition intervention at school setting, especially experiences of my institution, Simeo Rekfon. I myself, I come from Simeo Rekfon. It stands for Southeast Asia Ministers of Education Organization, Regional Center for Food and Nutrition. I'm also a lecturer at the Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Indonesia. The photo that you see in this slide is I take this from one of our school partner in Bogor City, who is very keen doing breakfast together at school once a week, in which the students are requested to bring their own meal from home and then enjoy it together with friends before the class is started. So if you see here, even the boys enjoying the meal before, we have quite doubtful, because boys, the school feels so reluctant to hold these sessions, because they think boys will never willing to bring their meal from home, because they just want to be practical. But it turns out that the moment is very fun, and it is done regularly every week until now. Yeah, for the outline of my presentations, I will share a very brief one slide of Simeo Rekfon profile, because I'm from Simeo. I think it's also better to introduce my institutions. And number two is a very brief about intervention study design as the bridging for the third topic, which is the core of the topic today, nutrition intervention study at school setting. So why school setting, and what are the packages of the intervention, what are the activities, and what are the outcome measures for the interventions. And we will also be sharing experience from Simeo Rekfon, and the last will be about the lesson learned that I can share with you about doing nutrition interventions at the school setting. If I talk too fast, so please let me know, because I may not, I may do it unintentionally. Yeah, Simeo Rekfon, as I mentioned before, Simeo stands for Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organizations. The Simeo organization was established in 1965, so we are more than 50 no, 60, yeah. We are about to reach our 60 years. And all in total, there are 26 Simeo centers in Southeast Asia, including one Simeo center in Laos PDR, Simeo Regional Center for Community Education Development. But unfortunately, until now, I haven't had any opportunity to visit Laos. Hopefully one day. And while the RECFON itself, it stands for Regional Center for Food and Nutrition. So judging from the name, our focus is really about food and nutrition. Formerly, we are known as Simeo TropMed, Tropical Medicine Regional Center for Food for Community Nutrition, under the Simeo TropMed network based in Bangkok. But in 2011, we became a full regional center, and our name is shift into Regional Center for Food and Nutrition. Our institution is located in Jakarta, Indonesia. So hopefully one day you will have opportunity to visit Jakarta, or some of you may have been in Jakarta. So really happy to have you again in Jakarta for your next visit. Okay, now I will go into the second issue, a brief on intervention study design. I think my colleague some weeks ago, Ibu Yudi, Dr. Yudi, she shared with you about the observational study. I think she also used this scheme to outline many study design in epidemiological study, and where the intervention study lay in this scheme. So as you may also know, there are two big group of epidemiological studies, the descriptive and analytical. If you look at the name, yeah, descriptive, so it really describe something, yeah. So it is considered as simpler compared to the analytical study, because they really present percentage, yeah, the magnitude of the problem, but they don't really try to associate it with anything. And you will also see that there are case report and case series which fall under the descriptive, because they really, for example, for the case report, it is usually in the medical field. If for example, there is a new disease or a new treatment is introduced, they really want to describe the journey of the patients, the symptoms, and the journey of the treatment. So they really make a very thorough and detailed notes, and they report it as one case report. And we also have case series and descriptive survey. While for analytical study, there are two groups as well, observational and experimental. Observational, it observe, it based on the observation. So the study team doesn't do any intervention. So they really leave it to the nature. So the association, the magnitude of the problem, the occurrence of the exposure and outcome is really by nature. So the study team will not interfere anything. They observe and then document the occurrence of the outcome, the occurrence of the exposure, and then they try to do some analysis, associate them, whether or not, for example, the prevalence of smokers are significantly higher among patients with lung cancer, for example. So, but they don't interfere the intensity of smoking among the smokers. So the study team really leave it to the nature. There are three design under observational study design. Cross-sectional, the one that is really quite frequently used. They assess the outcome and exposure at the same time. And case control, they start with the outcome, they find the case, and they match it with the control, and then they go back asking about their past practices in order to find the risk factors that may contribute to the occurrence of the case. The third study design, the cohort, it is a prospective. So you start with the exposure, and then you follow the subject until they have the outcome under the study interest. And then again, you see whether or not those who are exposed have the higher risk to develop a certain disease, for example. While our session today is the one that I put under the yellow or the orange box, experimental study, or we say it also intervention study. Yeah, because the name is intervention, experiment. So the study team do intervention, yeah. So the exposure is controlled by the study team. So the study team has arranged a specific exposure to specific group, and then they monitor the compliance, and they take note some of the event that they think may be relevant, and then until a certain time period, they will measure the outcome, and then they will see whether or not the one which have intervention will result in the expected outcome. And they will do, of course, statistical analysis to prove the hypothesis. So that's as the introduction or a brief sharing, because I think most of you have also been very familiar with this study design. Okay, observational and experimental study. I have touched this a bit in the previous explanations. So for observational study, the study team or the researcher observe and documents the presence of the exposure and outcome, or sometimes we call it the independent and dependent variable. And the researcher will not do any intervention to the participants. While for the experimental, the researchers actively interferes by performing an intervention. And the intervention is part of the study design. Yeah, so it is intentionally arranged and done. And because of that, it is considered that the experimental studies compared to the observational study, the experimental study will provide a stronger evidence for causality. So that we can say the exposure caused the outcome. While the observational, because we cannot control the exposure, so it is considered have a less degree of evidence. But many researchers actually also argue that it is not necessarily true. For example, for the cohort study, if it is well done, cohort study, although it is observational study, but they believe that cohort can also provide a strong evidence about the causality. And also because not all study can be arranged as interventional study due to ethical issue. For example, smoking and lung cancer, we cannot intervene by asking one group to smoke a certain number of cigarettes a day. It is not ethical. So we cannot do that kind of study using intervention study. So we have to go with either case control or cohort. Hopefully, my explanation is clear. So the next is about the types of experimental study. So if you look at the literature, actually they mention there are some variations, yeah. How many types of experimental study actually exist. But in general, there are 3 common types of experimental study. The first one is the RCT, randomized control trial, and it is considered as the gold standard of evidence-based study, because in the RCT there are two key aspects that are fulfilled. The first one is randomization, and the second one is availability of the control group. So if we do randomization, we give each participant an equal chance of being allocated into the groups. So we don't have any preference. So they will be randomly assigned into either the intervention group or the control group. So by doing so, the bias due to the difference in the characteristic of subject will be equally also distributed among the intervention and control group. So randomization is really reducing the selection bias, and therefore the RCT will have higher internal validity. So at the end, especially due to the presence of the control group, at the end, we can firmly say that any difference in the outcomes of the study is really attributed to the interventions. So we can firmly say so. So that's why RCT is considered as the gold standard in terms of providing evidence of causality. The second types is non-randomized control trials. So if you look at the name, this type of study, they still have control group, but they do not do randomizations to allocate the subjects. Compared to the RCT, of course, it is more feasible and more ethical, because they say that some researchers believe that participants also actually voluntarily have preference to receive what kind of intervention. So this is something to do with the ethical issue, and also, but because of that, because a preference of being allocated into a one group but not the other group, so then the non-randomized control trial is considered susceptible to bias, because, for example, if subject A want to be in the intervention group who will be receiving counseling on physical activity, for example, maybe this subject is the one who have more health conscious, who have more motivations, because she really want to be in that group to follow all the instructions. So this kind of motivations, if the study is about behavior change, so the difference motivation compared to the participants and in the control group will introduce bias to the outcome. We also know the non-randomized control trial as quasi-experimental design. The third type is pre-post intervention. So in this type of study, we only have single arm. So we only have one group. We don't have, in general, pre-post intervention, they don't have control group. So they measure the outcome before and after, and they compare with the same subject. However, because we don't have a control group, so this type of study is also considered weaker compared to the RCT because do not have control over other elements that may also change during the interventions, will also bias the outcome. For example, if we do nutrition education for 1 year and we don't have control group, so maybe the outcome that is measured 1 year after is some part is really due to our intervention, while some other part is because the students are older now. So they learn something more, yeah, the older the children, so the more knowledgeable they are. So the outcome when we measure their knowledge about nutrition after 1 year, we cannot really conclude that the increase of the knowledge is really because of our nutrition educations, yeah, because we don't have control. So that is the weakness of the third type of experimental study. However, we may see that a lot of publications in the quite prestigious journal, they also use pre-post intervention, but a well-designed one. Yeah, so they try to minimize all the bias and they explain the impact of the bias to the outcome. So it is still considered as a good study and get published. Now, because we know how important control group is, so there are studies or the reference mentioned that there are, in general, there are 4 treatment received by the control group. First one, the control group receive no treatment at all. So, for example, group A, they receive nutrition educations, while group B, they don't receive anything. Yeah, and we know that in their school there is no such program is running that may provide a nutrition education. So the control group really receive no treatment. The second type of control group is they receive the standard care or the standard the standard treatment. For example, the study about increasing iron status among pregnant women, because government, for example, in Indonesia, they have a national program of giving iron supplementation to all pregnant women. So that is the standard care in terms of iron intake for pregnant women. So the control group will receive the regular standard. They still receive the iron folic acid. We cannot stop that because that's a standard treatment. But for the intervention group, for example, the study team intervene by doing the supplementation of multi-micronutrients. So it is not only iron and folic acid, but multi-micronutrient. But control group receive the standard one, the iron folic acid. So that's the example of the second type of treatment. The third one receive placebo because they say that sometimes the effect of the exposure to the outcome, sometimes it is also about the perceived benefit. Yeah, so that's why in order to minimize the bias, the control group also receive the same quote unquote product, but actually the content is different. For example, the intervention group, they receive yogurt with live probiotic, while the control group receive yogurt, but with no live probiotic. But the yogurt, the tastes are similar, the the consistency, the texture, everything is similar. So they cannot really differentiate between these two. So even the control group think that they also receive a similar intervention with everybody. And the last one is the control group will receive the alternative treatment. Alternative here mean, for example, if the intervention group receive more very interactive, very fun nutrition materials. They receive video, they join cooking class, they have a storytelling class about, for example, for elementary school, about eating fish, for example. While the control group, they also receive intervention, but the passive educations. For example, they only receive printed materials like poster or leaflet, but that's it. There is no such event where the students can actively participate in the event. So it's really just the poster placed in some area at the school, and that's it. So this is a passive nutrition education. While the intervention group, they will receive multiple education materials, many interactive and fun event that involving the students. So that's the illustration or the example of the 4 type of treatment received by the control group. Okay, I will go to the next slide. Now it's about the second topic, the second point of my presentations, school children and adolescents nutrition. So I will try to provide a brief rationale why we should invest or why should we pay attention to school children and adolescent nutrition, because in many countries, including Indonesia, we are really into nutrition among the most considered as the most vulnerable groups, pregnant women under 5 children, and also lactating women. But nowadays, the attention towards school children and adolescents nutrition become much higher, and there have been some national program as well that address school children and adolescent nutrition. I think this is also the case for Lau PDR and for other countries in Southeast Asia. And I outline here 6 points why school children and adolescent nutrition, because the first one, of course, their number, if you see the world populations, the percentage of school children and adolescent population is very big. I will give some picture in the following slide. And then the second one is the problem of nutrition in this age group is also high, including prevalence of anemia among adolescent girls and the rising of the prevalence of obesity among school children and adolescents. The third one, because this age group experience a very tremendous physical growth and cognitive development, so ensuring that they have a good nutritional status is really necessary. And number 4, this is about building a habit. People believe that when you build habit in the childhood, including dietary habit, it will be more likely to be persistent. I mean, it is still there. It is persist into adulthood, because habit, you build it gradually. So, but once it is there, it is usually there. Yeah. So if you have a good habit since childhood, usually it persists into adulthood. So it is good, because to change adult people is also challenging. For an interventions during school children and adolescent is also believed to bring 2 benefits in terms of time. benefits at the moment now, yeah, the current benefits, especially the school performance, considering that they are a school-going children and school-going adolescents, so school performance really matters. But it also bring a long-term benefit, especially if we talk about the productivity during the adulthood. Yeah, if you are healthy and have a good school performance, it will also determine your productivity and then your likelihood to have a better job when you enter the adulthood. And the last one is if we talk about especially stunting, studies has confirmed that this prevention of stunting should be started much earlier than we thought it should be, which is now why a lot of attention have paid into the adolescent girls, as they will be one day become a mother. So the reason number 6 is really into preparing the healthy next generations by preparing our adolescent girls to be very healthy, including have a good nutritional status. This is but this is from the 2019 database from ASEAN Secretariat in Southeast Asia, that 1/3 of our population fall under children and adolescents. So if we can answer their nutritional status, so we can see that our country will be the likelihood to produce a productive and healthy generation will be much higher. This is quite a new publications, meta-analysis from Biswas and the team 2023 in the Lancet from 140 countries about the risk of non-communicable disease among adolescents. If you can see here, a lot of our adolescents experience have inappropriate dietary practice that is believed to be a risk factor for non-communicable disease. Okay, now it's about nutrition intervention at the school setting. Why school? People, that's when we want to approach school, some people may understand why school setting, but sometimes we really have to convince why school setting. Yeah, for example, I put it as a number 1 factor because school enrollment rate is high, yeah, especially for the elementary school and junior high school. 90% or even more of them are really at school. So the proportion of the children and adolescents are at school. Although in some countries, the enrollment at the senior high school decreased because some of them, due to the condition, they have to go to work, so they no longer at school, or they got married. But in general, the school enrollment rate is high, so we can meet them mostly at school. Second reason is because school is considered an established system, and they have a structured organization and also a structured activities. So because if we want to intervene, especially nutrition education for behavior change, we need to have a regular exposure. We need to have regular interactions with the children. So school with the established system enable us to do so by also empowering the teachers to facilitate such activity at school. The third one, I really like the perceptions of the community and especially the parents. School is educational institution. So parents really trust schools as a place where it will teach their children a good thing, including building good habit and character, including, of course, a dietary habit. So they really trust schools as a source of knowledge and also skill for their children. And the last one is availability of global and national level commitment and policy to create healthy promoting school. Later on in the next slide, I will see one, I will show, yeah, this is it. At the global level, the WHO show the global commitment to promote nutrition at schools with the initiative called Nutrition Friendly School, NFSI. And this is part of the Healthy Promoting School, health in general, Healthy Promoting School, while this is specific about Nutrition Friendly School Initiative. The WHO just launched recently, 2021, the updates about the evidence of the Nutrition Friendly School Initiative. Yeah, just to share the brief about the framework. If we want to do nutrition intervention at school and to make the school as a nutrition friendly school, there are 5 components need to be considered and fulfilled. The first one is the availability of the policy at school and the capacity building to the school community to create their awareness. And the third one is curricula. There should be the curricula is not necessarily the compulsory, I mean the core curricula. It can be also the extra curricula about nutrition and health, and also how to create supportive school environment at the school, because if we provide knowledge but the school environment is not supportive, then the knowledge cannot be translated into practice by the children. And the last one is the nutrition and health services, including iron supplementation for adolescent girls, immunization for immunity, and also deworming tablet distribution to prevent anemia among the school children. So that's why if we are about to do study about intervention study about nutrition at school, we may need also to consider these 5 aspects into our intervention package. These are the summary of the result of the review. So for the point number 1, they say that if the school nutrition policies exist, then the study found there are a lot of good impact in terms of dietary and also nutritional status of the children. For point number 2 is how the parents' involvement is always associated with the better result of the intervention. For number 3, they say that if the nutrition education is really into behavior change and it is considered the age of the children, so the activity should be according to the age of the children. So activity for adolescents should not be similar with the activity in the intervention for grade 2, for example. Grade 2 is really about learning while playing, let's say, while for adolescents, they need to have a more complicated like competition, and they become the committee of the event at school. So adolescents is ready for such responsibility, but grade 2 and grade 3 is not ready. So we really have to consider the age group when we plan our nutrition intervention at school. And number 4, it is really about school feeding, creating a supportive school environment. The evidence so far is really about school feeding, especially in low-income setting. It gives positive impact. And the last one, deworming, nutrition counseling as part of nutrition service, give also positive result to the dietary practice. So this is the review from the WHO add up the existing evidence that how important to consider these 5 elements when we do intervention at school if we expect to see positive behavior change. These are some of the meta-analysis or systematic review published in a prominent journal, again providing additional evidence that nutrition intervention at school really can result in behavior change, but you can also see some of the interventions are considered not really robust interventions because of the methodology issue. Researcher, when they want to do intervention study, they of course have to do some situational analysis and literature review or reading, and mostly they are aware that there are some challenges at school that they need to anticipate before they do the intervention. The first one is the school acceptance, because as we know that school have a very tight agenda. I believe schools in Laos will also be not different. So they are wonder whether the educations or the activity that we are about to introduce in their school will add the burden or quote unquote the burden of the school community, and therefore they will tend to say no. And also the fact that in some schools they really put priority into academic while nutrition education is considered non-academic. So if they think that this non-academic activity will disturb the academic sessions, they will also tend to say no. And sometimes the school's reluctance is due to their unfamiliarity with the nutrition topic. So they think that they are not capable of facilitating such activity at school. The second challenges to be anticipated is the delay, because sometimes the schedule have a week of exam or a week of ABC accreditation from the authority, so many things. So the plan we have to have the backup plan in terms of the timeline. And the other challenges to be anticipated is fluctuate interest of the students to actively participate. We think that our activity will be fun and they will be also happy to join, but it turns out it's not necessarily the case. So we really have to arrange our activity as much as possible to be really into their preference, but of course we need to maintain or to keep the nutrition messages clear. So it's okay to have fun during the activity, like cooking demonstration. It is fun, but the nutrition message have to be also clearly convey or disseminate during the cooking session. The other things that is also become an issue of researchers on the intervention study is that the outcome of the study is not as expected. For example, when we plan the study, we carefully plan and we are quite confident that the outcome will be as expected. Like, for example, the knowledge of the students will significantly improve, their behavior will also significantly improve, and eventually their nutritional status will also improve. But at the end, after we finish the study, we do the analysis, it turns out that it is improved, but not statistically different. So we cannot say that from study point of view, it is not a strong evidence because the difference is not statistically different. Then we start wondering why it is not as expected. So I can outline 4 factors to be considered. The first one is the study objective and then the intervention that we do should be in line. Because, for example, sometimes our activity is only disseminate informations, but we expect to see the changes of behavior. So it is not in line because information dissemination only is proven able to increase knowledge but not behavior. To change behavior, we need beyond information dissemination. The other examples, if we aim to reduce obesity, we may need to cover both dietary and physical activity. So if one study only cover dietary but not physical activity and aim to see reduction of obesity, it is most likely that the outcome will not be as expected. Second point is about the adequacy of the sample size. So if the sample is not adequate, because we will do statistical analysis, yeah. So if the sample is not adequate, of course, we cannot detect the changes, even if there is a changes in the actual setting, but we cannot detect it. So sample size must be adequate. And then the evaluations to assess the impact should be appropriate. For example, if we want to study about the changes in the calcium intake, so the tools that we use, for example, if we use food frequency questionnaire, have to be really about the calcium-rich food. So we cannot use the standard FFQ, while we miss a lot of calcium-rich food in the study area. And the duration, of course. Sometimes we expect to see changes in behavior, but our intervention is very short. There is no such standard for intervention duration. How many months will be considered enough to see the behavior change, because it is also depends on the intensity of our intervention. But of course, if we expect to see changes in behavior, we have to do it longer than if we expect to see changes in knowledge only. And because of that, so we have to arrange intervention activities differently. If we aim to do only information dissemination, then individual counseling is also considered appropriate. But if we want to see behavior change, we have to add experiential learning. So the students have opportunity to practice what they know by learning by doing. Like, for example, do the breakfast together at school. So from that session, they know that, oh, having breakfast is not that difficult. So it's fun, it's easy, I'm okay. So vegetables is nice. So they try vegetables during breakfast together with friends. Nutrition competition. So they do the competition, but during the competition, they learn about nutrition. And the last one, the most ideal one, is information dissemination plus experiential learning plus healthy environment. Like if it is at school, so it is about the school canteen and also facilities for physical activity at school. So creating a school environment that is supportive for the adoptions of the knowledge. Okay. Now is the experiences of Simeorecfon. I will not tell this one by one, but I provide the table outlining the activity of the intervention, who the target is, and then what are the outcome measures and what are the impact of the study in each of the slides. But I just want to share some of the published studies of our center about the nutrition intervention at the school setting, raising fees among elementary schools to increase the fish consumption, and also increase the breakfast, reduce the overweight, reduce sedentary activity and snacking habit among overweight adolescents, and a package of interventions involving peer support and social behavior change among adolescents, and also evaluation of the national school feeding program with and without nutrition education strengthening back in 2018. And the last one is the study about reducing anemia among adolescents using the local specific food-based recommendations among adolescent girls. Yeah, like I mentioned, I have provided this in the slide, but I will not read it one by one. I have shared the presentation file with the committee, so I think they will distribute them to you later on. I just the one that I put in the box here is to share with you what type of intervention is provided to the treatment group, like here, elementary school. They have fish pond at school, and also they have a bento making practices with fish at school, and eating breakfast together with the menu have to have fish together, and also storytelling using the comic I illustrate below. While the control group, they receive passive educational materials, the infographic, and also the comic, but there is no such bento making, no breakfast together at school, no storytelling, and no fish pond at school. I would also like to show you this. This one is a study to reduce anemia among adolescents in Indonesia, because we are 90% are Muslim. So every Friday, the school break, not the class break every Friday is much longer than the other day, because the adolescent boy have to go to the mosque for the Friday prayer. So that session is used by the school to have event among adolescent girls, because adolescent girls do not have obligation to go to the mosque for the Friday prayer. So they do session, a very fun sessions. One box is for 1 week. Like for example, they read food label, they talk about menstruation and how nutrition needs is higher during for adolescent girls due to menstruations. They talk about healthy and strong bone, healthy snacks, and favorite lunchbox. So this is really adolescent girl sessions. While this one is about the obesity prevention, because obesity, they need quite a personalized intervention, because they have a self-esteem issue. So one of our staff doing interventions, which include individual weekly goal setting and verbal motivations. It's quite personal. Yeah, they have also a personal message text from the study team to persuade them and to motivate, and also to appreciate what they have done to go forward, trying to reach their goal that they set themselves. Okay, last one is about the lessons learned. Lessons learned number 1, for doing the intervention study, many evidence say that we really have to sufficiently explain about the study and the activity to the school management, because it will determine their acceptance and their support toward the study, especially for the study which lasts longer, not a week, not a month, but longer. And number 2, a school have to be heard and involved in the study implementation. So having a regular meeting with them to listen to their input and concern have to be done. And number 3, nutrition messages need to be specific and reinforced. Like I mentioned before, it's always nice to have fun activity, food bazaar, sport competition, but the nutrition message have to be clearly disseminated to the children. So not only having fun, but also they get nutrition messages. And it is suggested, strongly suggested, to do a package of intervention rather than a single intervention, because students need to hear the messages from many activities, and also to have a various activity is always considered more fun, and fun issue really matters for adolescent and school children. Lesson learned number 5. Experiential learning, not information dissemination only, will give additional impact in terms of social skill and character building in addition to knowledge and behavior. About the issue of involving children and adolescents as a peer support group, it is believed to be a very potential one. However, it is also a lot of evidence mentioned in order to optimally use the strength of being a peer, the adolescent have to receive sufficient coaching, which need to be regularly done because they need a direction also from us. These are the references that I use for the presentations, and thank you very much. I think I have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
เจ้าขอบใจดร.ไอเดชเนาะพวกท่านมีคำถามยังบอกที่จะถามเพิ่นเกตมานี่
Okay. ได้ยินเสียงมั้ยเนาะ
ได้
Thank you, Dr. ID for the very interesting presentation. So I also interested in the adolescent health and like school intervention. I have 3 questions to asking. So the first question is which strategy to when you use when you have intervention, right? you do it in the same school. So which strategy you explain to the control group or the intervention group why they do 2 activities to let them more convenient to participate. The second one is how you control the knowledge contaminate between the student in the school, because I think you do in the same school and there might have some contaminate between group. That's why it's not different between the knowledge. So I would like to know your experience about this. And the third one is if you found that is the good result, so how you will manage after finish the intervention to make it more sustainable, because sorry, the intervention allow after finish the project, everything is come back to the same. So we need more like a sustainable way to change. And yeah, what is your purpose? Thank you.
ให้เพิ่นตอบก่อนเนาะแล้วจึงแม่นอาจารย์ใส่วิเศษถาม
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Khatmani. So I hope I pronounce your name correctly. So you have 3 questions. Question number 1 and number 2, if I'm not mistaken, is a bit relate each other. In my experience, and also if I read the publications about the intervention study at school setting, they always do it in the different school, Dr. Khatmani. So they do cluster randomized control trial. So first they look at all the schools meeting the criteria of the schools, and then they randomly choose the schools to be in the intervention group and schools to be in the control group. So they randomly choose the schools. Once the schools are selected, for example, 3 schools A, B, C as the intervention group and D, E, F as the control group. So all the students and in the schools A, B, C will receive the same interventions. So we never have a study in one school where intervention and control group is in one school. So we always have them as a separate school. So it will prevent the contaminations of the knowledge, that first, and also it will technically more feasible for the study team and also for the schools to handle, because it will be similar, yeah. Breakfast every Friday once a week in the intervention group. So it will be participated by all of the students in that school. So technically it will be possible, feasible. And the other advantage of doing cluster randomized control trial is for related to your question number 3, sustainability. So if we invite everyone in the school A to join the breakfast sessions, so it will create a movement at the school. So everybody joining, everybody participating, in everybody experience that having breakfast together is fun. So that is one of the factor. Even after we finish the study, the habit of having breakfast every Friday retain in the school, because it has shift into a movement at the school level. So that's also another advantage of having cluster. So in one school, only one group, yeah, not in some students become intervention and some become control. However, if you do the assessment, you can select randomly the students, because when we do the baseline and endline, we measure the baseline and endline, we calculate number of sample. For example, we need only 100. So if one school have 300 students, we can randomly select 100 out of 300 to join the baseline and endline assessment. However, the activity is, we invite everybody in the schools to join the activity. Another thing that I want to highlight, because we do cluster randomized control trial, when we do the sample size calculations, we need to multiply it by what we call as design effect. Because we don't do simple random sampling, we do cluster random sampling. So we need to multiply the number of the sample from the sample size calculation. So it results in a bigger number of samples, but that's what researchers usually do. They don't mind to have bigger number of samples by doing cluster randomized control trial, because it is considered more feasible rather than doing separate one class as intervention and the other class as a control. So that's will be my response, Dr. Katmani. About the sustainability, yes, it's always an issue. Even the public study that I read mostly, they do follow-up assessment after the study finish, like 2 months post-interventions or 6 months post-intervention. They find out that the outcome become less and less, because the intensity of the activity also become less and less. So then maybe then we can predict that one day it will be back to the baseline conditions. One of the way they say that during the intervention study, we do not put school as the setting of the project only. So we really involve everyone at school. So like we empower the teacher how to do the nutrition education. So the nutrition education will not done fully by the study team, but some part will be done by the teachers. We are also expected to invite them to plan the activity. Of course, at the first we come with our own plan, but we invite them to give their input. So then they will see that the activity is also their activity, because it's some of the activity are they propose that activity, so it will create the ownership of the school. That's some of the thing that we have done, and some work, but some unfortunately do not work. But it give hope, because we empower the school community by some training. For example, we include their input as part of the intervention, and also we create a movement at the school, and we approach the school management, usually the school heads, to really support the activity. So it will increase the sustainability, although it will not be 100% similar with the activity during the intervention, Dr. Katmani. But it helps.
Thank you very much.
You're
And-
welcome.
เชิญอาจารย์ใส่วิเศษเลยเนาะ
Sabadi, do you hear me?
Yes really
Thank Thank you, Dr. Adi. I really great to join the second time for nutrition school. In fact, we also have a similar program, that plan to work in school. I would like to get your advice. For example, I don't know that which grade that is the best to do selection. Period experience that I work in now, we select the primary school from grade 3 to 5. And then because the secondary school is close by, but we don't have any intervention, just nutrition education. And then for the study, what criteria you have to select between, primary school or secondary school? And the intervention for how long? For example, in Sieng Kwang that we plan to work with, they don't have yet the school lunch. Sometimes only the home garden or nutrition education is enough to start with the school nutrition project. Thank you.
So I may continue with the Ajahn Sai Visin before you respond. So for example, in Laos, we plan to do a nutrition school. So we don't have specific budget to do this one. We need to join with other program. So in your experience, we should select the kindergarten or primary school for the interpoint. And the second one, how can we involve the school, private school, where they already have the budget or other project to implement? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Dr. Ula and Dr. Saifisin. So I'm afraid I don't have a very straight to the point answer to that questions. About the school feeding in Indonesia, for example, back in 2016, 17, 18 until 19, our Ministry of Education, they have a national school feeding program to all elementary schools in all the provinces. With the priority is the district with the high food security problem and the high stunting prevalence. The school feeding program is complemented by nutrition education and character building activity. The impact of the school feeding is considered successful for some indicators, but less successful in some other indicators. The program provide breakfast twice a week for a total of 100 days for each student. So it was a huge program indeed. Nevertheless, due to the pandemic and also the huge amount of budget to run such program, in 2020 the program is stopped, yeah. And in 2021, the UNICEF initiated a program for adolescents, which also include promoting breakfast at school. But different from the previous national program, where the government have to provide the meal, the UNICEF initiated program, it is named Aksi Bergizi, really encourage the students to bring their own breakfast from home. We at the beginning also have has a bit from the schools and also from district education office, they have hesitance because having breakfast is not a common thing. A second, economic issue is always the issue. However, when we start that, it turns out that the response is good, yeah. Although I should mention that the area of the pilot is in the area where the food security is also not good. So the students are from a middle low resources family. The key is not to mention the breakfast as a healthy. You should bring a healthy menu, because most parents interpret healthy menu as expensive. Like they have to provide meat, they have to provide, for fruit, it have to be the fancy one. Animal protein also have to be the fancy one. So rather, we introduce as having fun breakfast at school. So they could bring any food, quote unquote. At the beginning, we accept any type of food brought by the students. So not to discourage the parents and also the students. And after some times, when we get the acceptance of the students and parents, we start to encourage them to bring more variety of food. So I may say that that kind of approach works, although it's not 100% works, but it works. And it is believed to be able to cope the issue of unavailability of budget from the government to have a national school feeding program. Although it is believed that for some area which is the resources are very low, are very poor, assistance from the government in terms of free food at school is still needed. So the government work on that at the moment. About whether or not we should start with kindergarten or primary schools, I'm not sure I can also answer this to the point, because if we start with primary school, like in Indonesia, for example, primary school is obligatory and it is free of charge. So every school children have to be at schools when they reach the age of primary schools. So we can ensure that most of these school age children are at school. So having the activity at primary school will cover most of them. While kindergarten is not a compulsory education in Indonesia. So if I may refer to the condition in Indonesia, if we reach kindergarten, we may miss a lot of children. But if we target primary school, I think we cover most of them. However, there is also advantages to target kindergarten, because starting a good habit earlier is always a good thing. So kindergarten is, they are very curious, and people consider that it is easy to convince them to do something. Depends on how we deliver the messages. So kindergarten is always also a good target to start with. So, but again, if I use Indonesian setting as examples, in terms of coverage, because kindergarten is not a compulsory education, so we may miss some of the children who do not join kindergarten. But if we target primary school, elementary school, because it is obligatory compulsory, so we may then cover most of the school in that age. I think I will respond. That is my response, Dr. Ula and Dr. Saivisen.
Yes, thank you so much. That's a very great response, and we give us some idea how to start something like that.
Yeah, and about the second question from Dr. Saivisen about this home garden and nutrition education, I don't think I have respond to it yet, Dr. Saivisen. But can you repeat the questions?
แม่นบอกใส่วิเศษคำถามที่สองมีอยู่ในไส้ปะหรือว่าไปละ มันบ่แจ้งปันได้ใส่วิเศษ
ไม่ก่อนไม่เป็นไร
ได้ยินบัดนี้
Hello, you hear me?
Yeah.
ได้ยิน
Yeah, because I am from the Faculty of Agriculture and Department
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
Rural Economic and Food Technology. So
Yeah.
we participate nutrition program because we use nutrition sensitive agriculture. One
Yeah.
of activity is the school garden.
Mhm.
Because Lao, especially in the rural area, we don't have, even though Lao government have also the good policy for the school lunch, but we don't have budget to do that. That's why from agriculture point of view, we also say that, okay, if at least we can introduce the knowledge how to produce food, vegetable, or animal production, small animal, for example, they can use for the school lunch if they have, or they can bring home and teach their parent or eat with their parent. Is the one idea behind. But the challenge for us that we try before COVID, the first about, because we are researcher, we need data in fact to prove. But the school kit is too small, especially ethnic minority student. That's why in the same school they also have secondary school. That's why in the principle, even though this review, we don't have much evidence that how we can work with the school, because in the rural area of Laos, secondary school is still not fulfilled. Now we have 7 years in secondary school, but in some area only 3 years. After that, we assume that this also linked to the adult challenge that you present recently. That's why we don't have experience. I don't know that you try or not about the to select the intervention in the both primary school and secondary school.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Saifizan. Yeah, in our experience in Simiorecfon, home garden, I mean school garden, is also of the component of our nutrition goes to school program. So although the in general, because Indonesia is a very dense populations, and most people are now in urban compared to rural. So the area available at school for school garden is not as spacious as we expected. So but we still highlight the importance of school garden as one of the media to introduce nutrition as a media for nutrition educations. However, if we talk about the supply of the food for consumption, at the moment among all our school partners who implement the school garden, it is not the harvest from the school garden is not is never been sufficient for consumptions, yeah, but they are proud enough when they harvest the vegetables, because mostly are vegetables. When they harvest the vegetables and it contribute as the supply of their cooking class, because they also have cooking class, they are proud enough that their vegetables that they plant themselves, that take care of themselves, is part of the vegetables used for the cooking class. So in terms of nutrition education, I think so far it works. They are happy, and also character building is invested there, responsibility of taking care of plants. But if we talk about the supply, at the moment we cannot use the harvest as the only source of supply for the school lunch, like you just mentioned. But the importance and significance contribution from the school garden activity is seen. Like I have Ibu Iis here. She is my colleague who become the person in charge for our school partners in Malang, in one city in Indonesia. And one school have a very spacious area, and they have a school garden with vegetables, and also catfish farm taken care by the students, secondary students. It works well. And I don't think I have a very specific suggestion for you, Dr. Stuyvesant, unfortunately, but I may say that school garden is proven to be a very potential media for nutrition educations, and also for character building, but not in terms of supplying food for school lunch, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. I agree with you. And then I hope that we can try together somehow, in Laos or Indonesia to compare.
Yeah.
effectiveness.
Actually, we have Simiorecfon have a module on how to optimally use school garden as a media for nutrition education, and we have it in English as well, Dr. Saifizan. So hopefully I can share it with you. How to
I send my email in the chat, and then maybe we can discuss. And thanks so much. Very nice. And then I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you come to Laos, please let us know. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
โอเค
Thank you.
คำถามสุดท้ายเนาะวันนี้ดร.สมพรคือสิสุดท้ายแล้วเพราะว่าเวลาเขาก็ใกล้สิหมดแล้วเอาเชิญสมพร
อาจารย์ต้องขอเว่าภาษาลาว
ยัง
อ่า
เพิ่น
สมพร
สิแต่อยู่
สถาบันโดย อันน้องมีสองจุดที่อยากแลกเปลี่ยนซื่อๆเนาะกะขอขอบใจสำหรับเป็นบทเรียนที่ดีแล้วก็มีความสำคัญหลายในบ้านเฮาเพราะว่ามันก็มีสกูลลันช์อยู่ลาวอยู่แล้วเนาะฉะนั้นข้าพเจ้ามีจุดหนึ่งที่ว่าได้ลงกับเวิร์ลฟู้ดโปรแกรมเพราะว่าปัญหาอนีเมียอยู่บ้านเฮามันหลายเนาะก็เลยว่าเพิ่นมีโปรเจกต์ตัวหนึ่งที่จะผสมฝุ่นวิตามินลงในข้าวเหนียว ฉะนั้นตัวนี้กำลังอยู่ใน process เนาะแล้วก็เลยอยากแลกเปลี่ยนว่าเพิ่นมีประสบการณ์ทางด้านตัวนี้บ่เนาะในการว่าให้ฝุ่นวิตามินอยู่ในโรงเรียนที่ว่ามีสคูลลันนี่นะเนาะอันที่สองแม่นเพิ่นได้ควบคุมเกี่ยวกับเรื่องมันมีกฎในการควบคุมเรื่องอาหารในโรงเรียนเช่นว่า environment พวกที่ว่าขายเป๊ปซี่ขายสแน็คขายพวกอันนั้นหั้นนะเวลาเฮ็ดการศึกษา เพิ่นได้โรงเรียนเพิ่นที่เพิ่นเฮ็ดการศึกษามันมีการควบคุมตัวนี้บ่เนาะเจ้าขอขอบใจ
Thank you very much questions. I will answer the question number 1 about the food fortifications for a school feeding. Our experience of Semiorecfon experience about school feeding program is when we assisted our Ministry of Education to evaluate the National School Feeding Program back in 2017 and 2018. If you look at the objective of the National School Program in Indonesia, we do not explicitly mentions the use of fortified food in the program. Instead, what is highlighted is the use of a locally available food by optimally use the local farmer and the local market as the food supply of the school feeding program, because during the program the cooking committee are the parents of the students. They have 2 or 3 cooking team who will cook once a week, and the supplier of the food have to be a local farmer and the local market. So because one of the objective of school feeding program is for improving the local economic. So unfortunately, the use of fortified rice or fortified food product is not explicitly encouraged. But nowadays, in this year, UNICEF and Ministry of Health start to do a school feeding program in the limited area in East Indonesia, because this area is really the resources are very poor. So in order to prevent anemia among adolescent girls, we promote breakfast, but they really cannot provide breakfast. So then the government, with the support from UNICEF, provide the breakfast. In that program, the use of fortified food is highlighted. For example, by saying in the guideline, if we fry the foods, use fortified cooking oil. So that's the experience that I can share with you, Dr. Sompon, but not specifically about the fortified rice, like what you mentioned happened in Laos. For the question number 2, about how to create a supportive school environment, whether or not we consider the presence of the shops or store nearby the school and also inside the school. Yes, it is a big challenge, and at the same time a big opportunity for us when we do our nutrition intervention. We always try in our nutrition interventions, we always look into both sides, the demand and then the supply. The demand is through building knowledge and skills of the students, how to select healthier foods. But at the same time, we encourage a better food supply at school by strengthening the school canteen, and also try to minimize the effect of the street food vendors, which are many of them are outside the school premises. However, I think it is also the same case with Laos. We do have regulations about the healthy school canteen from Ministry of Health, and then also endorsed by Ministry of Education. Nevertheless, it seems that the focus at the moment about the strengthening school canteen is mostly about the food safety. It's a very minimum about the nutrition aspect. So we are aware that the issue of food safety at school, like the use of illegal food coloring and illegal food preservative are very common, and it becomes a big issue. So food safety is still, if I may say, the focus of monitoring of school canteen and street food around the schools by our government for Indonesian context. However, we try to also make them try to also create their awareness about the other aspect of food at school, which is the nutrition aspect. But we are aware that we cannot say, oh, you are not allowed to sell this. You are not allowed to sell A, B, C. While we know that school canteen is also about the profit, the school canteen management also want to get profit by selling what is preferred by the students. So we cannot simply say you are not allowed to sell A, B, C, and they have to change everything, because we can say that it will get a huge rejections from the schools. What we do is we try to provide options for the school canteen. For example, fritters. Fritters is very common in Indonesia. Sweetened beverages is also very common. What else? Yeah, instant noodle. In some of school canteen, they sell instant noodles. So what we do is we encourage them to, for example, one day in a week, there will be a no fritters day, for example. Or if they sell instant noodle, the sellers should include vegetables in the instant noodle. And we also encourage them to have a 1 day of fruit day in school canteen. So we try to encourage to not to shut down, not to dramatically change what the practice are, but to provide also options for the seller. And I may say that this approach works. That's for the school canteen. And of course, we also provide the capacity building for the school canteen. For the street food vendors, this is the challenge even more, because in terms of regulations, at the moment, there is no such a specific authority that take charge in the street food vendors around the schools. but sometimes they do some monitoring, but again, it is more into food safety issue, the use of illegal food coloring and food preservative, but less about the nutrition aspect. But I think the government also and many agency are working on it, try to find the best solution for it. But we admit that strengthening school canteen, although it is also challenging, but the challenge is less because the canteen is inside the school premises, so we can do the capacity building and mentoring in more organized way rather than the street food vendors outside, which are usually outside the school premises. I think that's going to be my response, Dr. Somphon.
เราเนื่องจากว่าเวลาเรามันหมดแล้วเนาะมีแต่ว่าให้อันวิรสิทธิ์กล่าวขอบใจเพิ่นแล้วเราก็สิได้ปิดการสัมมนาเราเนาะเชิญวิรสิทธิ์เลย
เจ้าเนาะสั้นก็สวัสดีอีกเทื่อหนึงบรรดาท่านที่นับถือทางแพงฉะนั้นกองสุดสัมมนาในมื้อนี้เนาะก็ถือว่าเฮาได้จัดตั้งปฏิบัติมาประมาณชั่วโมงกว่าๆเนาะฉะนั้นเห็นว่าบรรยากาศในการเผยแพร่ข้อมูลแล้วก็สัมมนาในมื้อนี้ก็เห็นว่าบรรยากาศมีความฟดฟื้นพอสมควรได้เฮ็ดให้ทั้งนักสัมมนากรเฮาแล้วก็ทั้งวิทยากรได้มีการแลกเปลี่ยนบทเรียนโดยเฉพาะทางด้านการถามตอบปัญหาที่มันที่ติดพันกับสปป.ลาวและทางข้าพเจ้าขอตีราคาว่าสุดสัมมนามื้อนี้แม่นว่าบรรลุตามจุดประสงค์และคาดว่าน่าจะตอบโจทย์สำหรับผู้ที่เข้าร่วมในกองประชุมมื้อนี้เนาะแล้วก็อีกเทื่อนึงขอชมเชยนักวิทยากรที่ได้กักเตรียมเนื้อในการสัมมนาแล้วก็เผยแพร่มื้อนี้ถือว่ามีเนื้อในค่อนข้างสมบูรณ์แล้วก็สามารถอธิบายให้แก่ผู้เข้าร่วมจะแจ้งเนาะหวังว่าจะเป็นประโยชน์ต่อนักแขกที่เข้าร่วมในกองประชุมมื้อนี้ข้าพเจ้าในนามต่างหน้าศูนย์พัฒนาการอิงตามการมอบหมายของหัวหน้าศูนย์ขอขอบใจมายังนักวิทยากรและผู้เข้าร่วมออนไลน์หมดทุกๆท่านขออวยพรแด่บรรดาท่านจงมีสุขภาพเข้มแข็งสำเร็จต่อหน้าที่การงานของท่านและมีความเจริญก้าวหน้าในอนาคตก็หวังว่าในอนาคตหรือในเดือนต่อๆไปจะได้เห็นบรรดาท่านเข้ามาร่วมสัมมนาในครั้งต่อไปและก็มีหัวข้อใหม่ๆที่จะมาแลกเปลี่ยนกับบรรดาท่านข้าพเจ้าขอขอบใจและก็ปิดสุดสัมมนานับแต่วินาทีนี้เป็นต้นไปขอขอบใจหลายๆเจ้า
Yes thank you bye bye thank you Ade
Thank you Dr. Are
Thank you, everyone.
yeah thank you
Have a
bye
good day.
a good day too
Can we take picture before we leave?
okay
it's
that's
good.
good idea
โอเคฉะนั้นขอให้แต่ละท่านเปิดกล้องเนาะ
เปิดกล้องก็เดี๋ยวดรควร
โอ้
เหือน
เห็นสา
สิ
ว
แป
ญี่
ด
ปุ่น
อยู่
นี่
แล้ว
Hello.
สบายดี
สบายดีสาวญี่ปุ่น
Hello สบายดี
ID.
Nice to meet you all.
ขอให้แต่ละท่านเปิดกล้องเนาะเพราะว่า
Anybody can take picture. Dr. Ula who will take picture.
ไม่ได้วิว
Okay, I will take a picture.
สิทธิ์เนาะ
Thank
สิทธิ์เนาะ
you.
โอ
Yeah.
เค one two
1 2 3
okay thank you
Okay, one more time.
บ๊ายบาย
1 2 3 Okay. Thank you everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you. Stay
See
healthy.
you.